beware, because today's video contains spoilers. I'm talking about Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, and we're going to do a deep dive. Let's get into it. Last warning, there will be spoilers. I'm going to be talking about Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead, get out of here. I've got a spoiler-free review that you can actually go ahead and watch, and I will post the link up here. Yeah. All right. So first off, the movie starts, the Star Wars title scroll comes through, and boom, immediately we're told the Emperor lives. The dead speak. Well, go on to find out, there is an audio recording that's sent out. Everyone hears the voice of the Emperor. Kylo is pissed. He's out there raging, which I loved how they put that in there, that he was raging, because then it just, boom, opens up. He's going into, there's ships that fly into Mustafar, cuts to him on Mustafar, just wrecking people. And then he finds a Sith Wayfinder, hooks it up to his ship, follows the Wayfinder, gets to the, the destination. Turns out that it is Malachor. It's the Sith, home planet, I guess. And Kylo goes in there, and immediately he hears Palpatine's voice, and it turns out it's true. Palpatine lives. Well, he even states himself he did die, but they brought him back to life with some science and some Sith wizardry, and yeah, he's back. He's frail and basically all emaciated and blind, and he's got these super skeleton looking fingers, and he's hooked up to machines. He's barely alive at all. Basically tells Kylo, boom, gonna get in there. If you listen to me, you'll get all these ships. So yeah, we do that, and it's awesome. It just immediately, you're just put into it. You're like, oh man, things are real. The Emperor's back. This dude, the king badass of badasses for 6 other movies, is all of a sudden, turns out he's been there the whole time. He was behind Snoke. He was the one feeding Kylo just visions and stuff, and communicating with him as Vader. And yeah, so Kylo decides to kind of go along with it. He fixes up his helmet, gets that cool little red scarring, and welds it together. We end up showing kind of by inferred, whenever they're talking about the spy that's in the First Order, they immediately point out that it's Hux. Hux is the spy, and he's kind of trying to throw Kylo under the bus. Another general, General Pride, basically discovers it. He kind of had suspicions the whole time, and then just point blank shoots Hux, kills him, gets rid of him, gone. Then we see clips of Rey. She is training. She's meditating and floating, got rocks all around her, which is kind of cool. Then she is talking to Leia, and then runs a little obstacle course. Kylo's kind of messing with her and trying to get inside of her head, send her visions, and just kind of throw everything off. He's trying to tamper with her, get her pissed, and turn it to the dark side. Which, was pretty cool. We saw them kind of interacting back and forth. They are in this movie they talk about them being a dyad in the Force, which means that there's two people that are so strongly connected through the Force that basically they can communicate at almost any time. They can, as we've seen in the movie, they can swap items. Like in The Last Jedi, Kylo gets water on him. In this movie, in The Rise of Skywalker, we where he snatches a necklace off of Rey's neck. He then also, they have a really freaking cool, like, lightsaber battle through the Force. Like, they're both in two different locations, but having a single lightsaber fight, which was badass. It looked awesome. They were switching back and forth. Whenever they were breaking stuff on one thing, bits and pieces of it were falling through to the other area. And that's end up how Kylo ends up locating Rey at one point whenever she's on his Star Destroyer. Then throughout all this, we come across a couple different things. There's cool stuff with some Sith artifacts, and we have Sith related and connected people. Through it, though, we do see Finn actually has something he wants to tell Rey. They're sinking in what I think he at the time thought was like quicksand or something, and he's yelling, oh, hey, Rey, I never got to tell you, and then they sink. Well, they ask about it. He kind of brushes it off. Comes back to it later. He gets questioned by Poe. He never really comes out and says it, but throughout the whole course of the movie, Finn's entire character, his little sentences, little things he kind of leaves, little breadcrumbs, they really mirror what Leia did and what she went through in Return of the Jedi, where she could sense things and she could tell how Luke was and she could feel with the Force and everything, and that was just kind of the beginning of her experience with the Force. In this movie, we actually got to see more of that fully come to fruition. We saw training between Luke and Leia, which was awesome. I loved seeing that. They used their de-aging CGI technology, which is just really kind of scary when you think about it, but they used that and had a cool interaction where Luke was training Leia. Leia handed over her lightsaber, and ends up ultimately that lightsaber is then stored away where Luke was hiding out, and then Luke gives it to Rey, and so she has both Anakin's original lightsaber, and then she has Leia's lightsaber. Well, before she gets the Leia lightsaber, she is kind of in a big rush. She's running off. She's trying to find the other Sith Wayfinder, because Kylo has one from the beginning, but there were two created. So she's trying to find the second one. So she runs off. Turns out, through all this mystery and everything, it is on the second Death Star, the one from Return of the Jedi. And we take that. She then finds bits and pieces of that Death Star, and it's on one of the other moons of Endor. Not the Forest Moon, but it's a different moon. It has a name, but I forget the name at the moment. I apologize. They didn't mention it in the movie. It's in the novelization and everything where they're talking about stuff. But at the moment I can't remember what it was called. But they go to this planet, to the moon. They look, and she finds out that it's on this one room on the Death Star. She goes there. It turns out it is the chamber where Palpatine kept Luke to make him watch his friends possibly die during the Battle of Endor, and he then ends up, Luke has the lightsaber fight with Vader, and Vader ultimately throws the Emperor over the edge. It's in that room, and it is awesome. It is all beat to hell. It is cool looking. But she finds a door, and the door opens mysteriously just to her. And she goes in, and we see like these reflective kind of panels and slabs that had the same kind of effect as the like glowy reflective rock from the little Sith temple hole thing from the Last Jedi, where Rey went down there and she saw like the vision of like all the like multiple versions of herself. It was like the same like reflective thing. Ultimately, she goes in there, she sees the Wayfinder, she grabs it, and then has a vision where she's confronted with an evil version of herself, with herself. And the evil version had a double-sided red lightsaber and just kind of comes at her, and it was collapsible. It would like fold in half, and which was kind of cool. And she ultimately gets kicked out of the room. She drops the Wayfinder. Kylo grabs it. He's there. She's like getting real bossy, getting kind of threatening, telling him, give it to me. And he won't. And so he says, the only way you're getting there is with me. And then he crushes it. She gets mad. They start this awesome lightsaber battle, just fighting throughout the Death Star. They ultimately end up outside, on the outside of the Death Star, fighting. And there's water crashing up from these huge waves. And it's just one of the coolest looking fights, like visually. They go back and forth. Ultimately, Rey kind of gets worn down, and Kylo's about to like strike her down and just kill her. And then before he does, there's just a pause, and then we see a vision of Leia, who just reaches out with the Force to speak with him and distracts him, and Kylo drops his lightsaber. Rey catches it and then stabs him, drives it through. Leia then, that was the last of her strength, she passes away and dies. And then, Kylo's sitting there. He has a hole through his stomach and he's dying. Well, we had seen it earlier where Rey healed some kind of basilisk looking snake monster, and she reaches down, touches Kylo, and heals his wound. But it also, in the meantime, heals the scar on his face. When she does that, she kind of, tells him, yeah, I did, want to reach out and take your hand whenever we were, in Snoke's throne room. But I wanted to take Ben's hand, not Kylo. And then she kind of gets in his TIE fighter, flies off, goes to meet Luke, and that's where she gets Leia's lightsaber. Well, I think this is one of the coolest scenes where Kylo is just having this like introspection. He's just kind of lost. He's just having this moment, and he ends up having like a memory flashback kind of vision where his dad, Han Solo, appears to him and talks to him. And they have this like real heart-to-heart. It really reflects and mirrors what happened in episode 7, where they're on the bridge and they're talking. But ultimately, instead of driving his lightsaber through Han, he takes his lightsaber, turns around, hucks it into the ocean, and then turns back around. Han's gone. The next time we see Kylo, though, I guess at this point he should be Ben. And so we see Ben, and he shows up on Malachor to help out Rey. And they are then confronted. He ends up fighting off the Knights of Ren, and she's kind of confronted with some, I don't want to say Praetorian guards, but they're kind of like that. And she fights them off, and she had, through their power of being a dyad, they handed off Anakin's lightsaber. So Kylo Ben with Anakin's lightsaber and Rey with Leia's. They fight off these people. They join back up in the throne room. They have this cool like scene where they both raise their lightsabers ready to battle, and then the Emperor immediately just kind of the Emperor beats them down. He just like pulls them in, and by accident he realizes that they are a dyad, and he absorbed some of that life force energy between them, and it healed him. And so he, with the force, holds them still and drains them, restoring himself, and they both pass out. They both come to eventually. First, Ben comes to. He, gets knocked away. Palpatine thinks it's kind of poetic to throw him down a hole, since he once got thrown down a hole. And then eventually Rey goes to wake up. Well, when she wakes up, she kind of is just staring into the sky, watching Palpatine shoot lightning into the sky, and knocking out all the ships and kind of stopping all their computer systems, so that way they're falling out of the sky. But she has this kind of vision where all these past Jedi voices speak to her, and she kind of gathers herself and gathers up her strength and pulls Leia's saber to her, and she goes and confronts the Emperor. The Emperor stops his attack on the sky, so that all the ships stop falling. They're able to get back on their attack and attack this giant fleet of Star Destroyers equipped with Death Star-like cannons that can destroy a planet. And she takes him on, and she's holding him back, and they have this bit of an exchange where he says, "Oh, I'm all of the Sith," and she comes back that she's all the Jedi. She pulls Anakin's saber to her, pulls out two, blocks the Force lightning that the Emperor's shooting at her with both lightsabers, kind of pushes up against to him, gets close, and reflects back the lightning, electrocutes him, destroys him. He explodes. The whole throne room explodes. It's a big old mess, and then she passes out dead. And for a moment there, I thought they might actually keep her dead. I thought she was just done, and that was kind of her arc. Well, Ben climbs up out of the hole, sees her, goes over, picks her up, and kind of a weird Shakespearean Romeo Juliet kind of thing, and holds her in his lap, and he's holding her close, and he's just, you can see he's kind of upset, and then he kind of clicks that he could heal her, and he uses his Force power to heal her, and she comes to, and they're sitting there, they're looking at each other, kind of smiling, and then they kiss, and then he kind of smiles and just kind of drains of all color and falls over, and then a few moments later he just disappears like a Force ghost, kind of like how Obi-Wan did. And yeah, it's just kind of odd. He just sacrificed himself to bring her back to life and went kind of full redemption, brought himself back, which I feel like is a pretty fitting arc for him. It was cool to see. I would have liked to see him stick around and see more, but I do feel like this is definitely a cool thing that they did for his character and let him kind of take on that role. Skywalkers and always sacrificing themselves to save other people, save the people they love. Ultimately, I did enjoy the movie. From the Jedi voices, having, characters like Anakin, both Obi-Wans, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka, to, Finn possibly being Force sensitive, which was kind of confirmed by J.J. Abrams. We got to see, at the very end, we got to see Rey's lightsaber, which was made of her staff, and she had a little flick, a scroll wheel thing that was her activator instead of a button, which was cool. And it was yellow, which we had not seen a yellow one, I don't think, on film and I don't think we saw it in the Clone Wars or anything. That would have been the only other time we would have possibly seen it. Yeah. But people want to talk about how, Rey, how she was so strong and she didn't train for anything and all that. But that's because her and Kylo were a dyad. She was able to pull whenever he mind probed her in The Force Awakens, when he was mind probing her and trying to find where, Luke was hiding, she was able to pull information from him as well. And that's how she learned most of what she did, because obviously she didn't do a ton of training with Luke, but she did pull a bunch from Kylo in that. So she had learned a lot in just that moment, even though she herself didn't do the training. They were able, they share a connection and are able to basically be like one person. They share the knowledge and power, and that's even reflected. They both fight very similarly throughout the course of the movies, which, I mean, there's different forms, but like they're constantly fighting very, very, very similarly. Them being a dyad, I mean, it really is the whole point of it. I mean, that's why they're able to have the connection in The Last Jedi. It's why, they have this deeper connection and are able to switch items and pass things through the Force in this movie, The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, it's a really interesting concept, and I think people are really discounting it because they really want to hate on Rey because they feel like she didn't earn anything, which, yes and no. I mean, it's because of her being a part of the dyad. She was able to learn that from Kylo, and Kylo learned things from her. Able to learn how to heal, with the Force and everything. Like, he didn't train for that. He got that from her there at the end. It's a really cool concept. I really liked how they executed it. They weren't in your face about it, so you kind of had to read between the lines up until this movie, whenever Kylo just kind of comes out and explicitly states they're a dyad, and then later on the Emperor says they're a dyad. The only other things I can think of with this movie, though, people were saying that the Emperor coming back somehow negates Vader's sacrifice. That's not true. Vader's sacrifice was done to save Luke, to save his son, not to kill the Emperor. He did it to save his son. His sacrifice was completely, justified. He did kill the Emperor. The Emperor died. The Emperor was just brought back by some crazy mystical means. His sacrifice was completely, justified. He did kill the Emperor. The Emperor died. The Emperor was just brought back by some crazy mystical means. And so, yeah, that was just a crazy turn that we didn't expect. The other things, people were saying that Luke's character is different. Well, it was different from the beginning of The Last Jedi. The beginning, he had disconnected himself from the Force. He was just completely out to want to destroy the Jedi and the Sith. He wanted them gone. He thought they were just causing ruin, and so he cut himself off. He threw the lightsaber like it was nothing, and he was being very disrespectful. Well, by the end, when he reconnected himself to the Force and was teaching Rey, and then saw and felt, what was going on with Leia, and then he ultimately, force projected himself to Crate and fought Kylo. He, did that knowing that, this technique was so strenuous, it was most likely going to kill him. So he was going to die, and he knew that, and he did it anyways to save everyone there. He sacrificed himself and became the Jedi, and apologized to Leia, and found redemption and peace and he was no longer at odds with the Jedi. I mean, we saw that, once again with his conversation he had in The Last Jedi with Yoda. So I mean, his character was different because it grew. He had a very big evolution in The Last Jedi, to where he went from this kind of like apathetic, like I want to stay out of it, I just want this all to be over and gone, it's all awful, to finding his connection and love with it, and coming back to the Force, and then respecting everything, and wanting to pass on and teach everything. The other things that we saw in this, though, there are some unfinished arcs. We saw an arc with Janna where she was talking to Lando at the end, and they were discussing, finding out where she's coming from. So there's kind of that adventure with Lando and Janna. Rey, Finn, and Poe had their own separate thing, to where they were kind of... this movie had some kind of implications of like romance on all kinds of different levels. This movie was packed full of stuff. I mean, we got nice little touches of things that we wish we had seen years ago, with Leia being trained in the Force. We got just cool new concepts and things like the dyad. We saw Rey actually use Force lightning, which was kind of cool because we hadn't seen a Jedi ever use Force lightning. I mean, she did it by accident and did it out of anger and hate, and that's why it happened, but we saw it. They definitely cranked these movies up. I enjoyed them. I know a lot of people didn't. I think people are ridiculous. They're just trying to not enjoy these movies as much as they can. I mean, they're good, enjoyable movies. They're fun. Not every character is going to have tons and tons of backstory. I mean, people want to hate on Finn because, there's no story to him, but he's still a fun, cool character. He's hilarious. He's there. He cares about everyone deeply. And, I mean, to be honest, Han Solo's character was kind of flat. I mean, all we knew was he was a smuggler and owed Jabba some money. But he was there. And people didn't really say much. We liked him because he's funny and charismatic and just kind of a witty guy. Like, he was just fun. And I mean, but we didn't know a lot about his character. We don't know where he came from until Solo came around. People really don't want to enjoy these movies, but they're really actually good. They're unique. They pushed things with these Star Wars movies. They did things that they had never done before. They kept things mirroring the previous movies to kind of give it that sense of familiarity, but also to show, once again, as Star Wars always does, that history repeats itself, and that they have to kind of break the cycle. But yeah, I mean, if you're truly a fan of Star Wars and you love these movies, even I know people that hated Episode 8, they like this movie. It's so good. Go out, see it, check it out, and leave some comments. Tell me what you think, what you like, what you don't like. Tell me how awful and stupid I am, whatever. Leave a comment. Let's talk about it. And you guys have a great night.